All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our third and final reunion edition of Catching Up With. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Our next guest is a man of many interests and many successes. If you were at the class of 1965 dinner last night, you had the pleasure of sampling some of his wine he produces in his vineyard in Northern California. And if you've ever watched television, you're probably familiar with the jingles from the company he founded, freecreditreport.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ed Ojdana.
Well, thanks, Kevin. It's really great to be here. And I have to tell you, this is the first reunion I have ever been to in my entire life.
Wow.
Not high school, not any. And I am so happy to be here. And it was just great last night meeting up with a lot of my fellow classmates, some of them which I have not seen for probably 45, close to 50 years. And then I'm honored to be here today, and when I look at who else you were interviewing, I'm kind of going like, so why is he interviewing me?
Well, we're thrilled. We're thrilled you came, and you've been busy over the last 50 years. So I understand why you weren't able to make it back for a reunion until now. We're going to get to all of that, but we like to kind of start off at the beginning. So where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Pennsylvania, but my dad was an Army officer, so we kind of moved all over. I did part of my growing up in Hawaii, Washington, D.C., and then about the time I was in the 4th or 5th grade, my dad got out of the Army, and we settled in Canton, Ohio. So I finished grade school at St. Joan of Arc, and then went to Central Catholic, which I graduated from, and that's what got me to Notre Dame. But I do have a story to tell about how I ended up at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So neither of my parents had gone to college, and I really didn't know much about schools or anything. And
right.
I was walking home from school one day, and there was this girl that I knew, and she had this book, and the title of the book was Knute Rockne, probably All-American or something like that. And I looked at that and I said, "Who's Knute Rockne?" And I had no idea who it was. But it turns out Central Catholic was kind of a feeder school to Notre Dame, and there were like 8 of us that came here. And so in a way it was kind of like the thing to do. The top guys in the class went to Notre Dame, and so that's how I ended up. And I think I'm the only one from that class that is here. I was hoping some of them would be. We had Norm Nicola, who was the center on the football team, was in that class, and Tom Chevreau, who played on the tennis team, and a number of others.
And so when you arrive at Notre Dame, where did you live? What dorms did you live in here?
Well, I lived in Keenan Hall on the top floor. In fact, I think 410 was probably the room number.
Wow, good memory.
Yeah, and my roommate was Dick Hutchins, and who I've lost track of. I have no idea, where he is. Second year, I was in Dillon Hall, and my roommate was Bob Donovan, who went on to be a doctor and unfortunately passed away about 10, maybe even 15 years ago. And that third year, I was in Pangbourne for half a year, and then I moved off campus to enjoy the good life, so to speak.
What did you study at Notre Dame?
And well, I was an aeronautical engineer, and probably the question is, well, why did you choose aeronautical engineering? And it was really at the urging of my father to go into engineering. I, in fact, would have much rather have been a cinematographer, and if Notre Dame had had a cinematography school, that's probably what I would have joined up and done. But given that engineering seemed like a good thing to do, and aeronautical sounded exciting, airplanes and so forth, I signed up for that, signed up for Air Force ROTC, and struggled to make it academically after.
What was the Air Force ROTC program like?
And I thought it was a good program, and I do have to say that when I joined, at that time, the Army ROTC guys, I think, would sign up and they'd get 6 months of active duty and 18 months of reserve duty, I think it was. So they only had a 2-year commitment. And of course, the Air Force had a 4-year commitment, and everyone looked at it and said, are you crazy? Well, as luck would have it, when we did graduate, it was the build-up of the Vietnam War. So a lot of those guys who signed up for Army ROTC ended up in Vietnam in tanks, and so I was fortunate. But it was an enjoyable program, and met a lot of great guys there.
And what's sort of your fondest memory from your student days here on campus?
Boy, that's a tough one.
Hard to choose.
I would say, senior year was probably just the greatest year. I think we all enjoyed the success of the football game, except for that last game.
Yeah.
Or the football team, I should say. But clearly, going up to the dunes when the weather finally got nice, and just being a senior at a great school, and knowing that it was going to be your last year, and trying to make the best of it before you went on.
Yeah. Not many classes at Notre Dame had a better senior year of football than you guys, especially considering what you've gone through in the first couple of years. Yeah,
and I a couple of years back, I had never met Ara Parsegian. I had an opportunity to meet him, and told him, that he really made my senior year, and his reply was, well, it made my year too.
So when you finish up your senior year, you majored in aerospace engineering. What was next? Did you have a commitment because of the Air Force ROTC program?
Well, I did, but I went on to graduate school. Went to Ohio State and got a master's in aeronautical engineering, and then I went into the Air Force, and I got one of these directed assignments. So I went to Wright-Patterson, and I was running a wind tunnel there, a big test facility, and I did that for not quite 4 years.
Okay, and then was that the kind of length of your stay in active duty in the Air Force?
It was. I got out of the Air Force in January of 1971, and I enrolled at, maybe I shouldn't say this too loud, University of Southern California, in business school, and eventually earned a doctorate in business economics and marketing.
And what made you decide to do that? You had the background in aerospace engineering. Why did you decide then to shift to business and go pursue a business degree?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's a good question, and I think really having worked as an engineer, I decided this is not what I really want to do the rest of my life. And so, when you're in that position, the only person who can change things is yourself.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to make a change, and I was going to find something I was passionate about. So I just wasn't passionate about engineering, and I felt that whatever one's life's calling was, you should be passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
So.
And so then when you finished your business degree, how did you start out your business career? What'd you do first?
Well, strangely enough, I still kind of stayed in the military industrial complex for a while. I worked at the RAND Corporation in Santa Monica, basically as a systems analyst, and looking at things like what's the Russian space program going to do. I spent a lot of time with the Air Force trying to help them figure out how to put together an R&D program. But what I really wanted to do was get into consumer marketing. So by hook or by crook, I don't know why they hired me, but I talked my way into a job at the Olympia Brewing Company.
Wow.
Up in Olympia, Washington.
Yeah.
And learned how to make beer.
All right.
It just seemed like a natural thing that a Notre Dame guy should do.
Yeah. Do you still know how to make beer?
Yeah. Well, I basically understand the fermentation process.
Okay.
And so that was my first foray into consumer marketing, and started me on a long road to a lot of things.
Yeah, speaking of long road, I took a peek at your resume, and let me see if I can get this right. You really moved around a lot there. You were in Olympia, Washington, Palo Alto, California, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, Orange County, and now you're in Northern California. Was that kind of just the Army brat in you? Why are you moving around so much?
Yeah. Well, part of it was job opportunities.
Yeah.
And part of it was, I think that was most of it. Some of it was just kind of serendipity. I ended up in Minneapolis with another guy because a venture that we were trying to get off the ground in California ran into some legal problems. So the company we were working for sent us out to Minneapolis to turn around this retail chain called Crown Auto Chain.
Okay.
And we were really only there for about 9 months, and people would ask me, well, how did you get this company turned around so fast? And I said, it was pretty easy. I wasn't going to spend another winter in Minneapolis.
Good motivation.
Yeah, it was cold.
So, you ended up founding freecreditreport.com. How did you first get involved in kind of the credit reporting industry?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I knew very little about credit reports, but I had this friend who always kind of seemed to be having some difficulties financially, and he started telling me one day about how difficult it was to get his credit report. You couldn't get a hold of a credit bureau, and even if you did get a copy of your credit report, you couldn't understand it anyway. So it sounded like there was a good opportunity there. So came up with this plan that we were going to allow people to download their credit reports initially into a software package, because this was really before the internet came along. And then all we needed to do was get access to credit reports.
Yeah.
So, kind of being naive, I said, well, that's easy. I'll just go talk to the credit bureaus, and
right,
they'll let us do this. Well, 2 of them never even responded, and the third one, which was TRW at the time, did, and I went and explained to them exactly what we wanted to do, and they looked at me and they said, let's see if I understand this. You're going to let people access our databases and look at their credit reports. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much it, but we'll put something in between so they're never really into your database directly. And they said, great, we'll call you. Well, there was a long period where it took me to convince them to let us do this, and part of the way I finally accomplished that was I just hired a bunch of people out of TRW who knew all this stuff and had the connections, and so they trusted these people I had hired and allowed us to go forward.
And so around what time was that? Was the internet kind of key in launching the company?
It was, because what I count as the official launch of the company was like 1996, and that was in very early days of the internet. They had just come out with a Mosaic browser so that you could have a graphical user interface. There was no infrastructure like there is today. Today, it's very easy to start an internet company. There's server farms. We had to build our own server farm. There was no back office systems for charging credit cards. So we had to invent all that ourselves in order to get this business off the ground.
Yeah. So Free Credit Report obviously has some very distinctive commercials with the band singing the songs about getting your free credit report. Were you behind the creation of any of those jingles?
And, I wish I could say that I was. We had a campaign before that we called Stickman, and it was an animated cartoon character.
Yeah.
And actually, that turned out to be an award-winning campaign, because no one had been able to make animation work in a direct response mode. And
wow.
We were kind of the first to do that. Then we followed it up with the band, and I wish I could take a lot of responsibility for that, because when they first brought it to me, I was pretty skeptical about whether this was going to work.
Yeah.
But I said, let's get out there and test it, and we'll find out.
And how instrumental were those commercials in kind of growing awareness of the company?
They were absolutely instrumental in that. And I, as I would travel and I'd meet people, not quite from all over the world, but they could all sing the jingle, which just amazed me.
Yeah.
So it really built the brand awareness up, and I attribute a lot of our success to that. But more importantly, to the team that I had put together. And they were a great team, and we had a good strategy, and I think, as I ended up selling the business to Experian,
right,
which was the old TRW, in 2002. And about that time, I think we were about $60 million in sales.
Wow.
And when I left, 5 or 6 years later, we were $1 billion in sales. So they helped us grow the business
Right.
significantly, and I'm just amazed, how well that business did.
And so you ended up as the CEO of Experian before.
Well, of a division of Experian,
Okay.
Experian Interactive. So
All right.
I ran their global internet business. So we also took the business, the product into the UK, and it was just as successful there as it was in the United States. And after I left, they've expanded it into Brazil, and I think even Russia at this point, in Poland.
And when you retired from there in 2007, you went in a completely different direction, and you started a vineyard there in Calistoga, California.
Right.
Why a vineyard?
Why a vineyard? Well, the question I normally get is, how did you get into the wine business?
Yeah.
And there's a very easy answer to that. I fell in with the wrong group. So I just, I had a bunch of guys that liked fine wine, and so I kind of got into that. But another reason was I had been invited by another friend of mine to join an advisory board at UC Davis for the Department of Viticulture and Enology, which is probably the premier school for training winemakers. So I'd been involved with that since about 2003, helped them raise money for their new research winery that they built and that. So I knew a lot about winery, and when it came time to retire, my wife Irene and I always wanted a second home somewhere, and so we went through the typical, should we do Tuscany, Provence, Australia, all that, and Irene said, that's a lot of jet lag.
Yeah.
So we've always liked Napa Valley, let's go there. And I said, okay, but if we're going to do that, we're going to have a vineyard, because why live in Napa Valley if you're not going to have a vineyard?
There you go.
So that was the start of it, and that was 2008. The first year we sold the grapes and to a boutique winery. And then the second year, we probably would have sold the grapes as well, but as you know, the economy tanked. So a lot of the wineries that bought grapes from vineyards cut back, and so we virtually had no markets. So we said, we always wanted to make our own wine. It's going to be about 4 years till this wine is ready. I think the economy will be somewhat back on track, so let's just go ahead and do this. And so we did, and the 2009 vintage, which is what we served last night, was our very first release, and which we, it's like giving birth to a child almost, and been a lot of fun.
And how did you choose the name?
And
what's the significance of it?
Significant of it, the 511 is our house number.
Okay.
In that, so
Vineyard 511. All right. And is there a type of wine you specialize in?
So Napa Valley is known for its Cabernet Sauvignon grape, and that's what we grow. So that's all we make. It's 100% Cab. We age it for 30 months in 100% French oak. So it really tames the tannins, and we're what they call mountain fruit, and tends to be, very small, intense berries. So there's a lot of tannin in them. So you've got to do something to kind of calm that down. Otherwise, you open it up and you drink it, and you just would pucker up. They get so tannin. So that's how we did that.
And you can get the wine here on campus.
Yeah,
right?
It's available at Morris Inn, and I don't know if people know this, but there are a lot of Notre Dame winemakers in Napa Valley. There's the Duncan family, which donated Duncan Hall and the new student center over at Crossroads, and they own Silver Oak and Toomey. The Gallows, which are like fifth generation Notre Dame graduates, Gallo wines. Paul Hobbs, who is a world famous vintner, is a Notre Dame graduate. And I didn't mention it, but at UC Davis, the department where they train the winemakers, there are 2 Notre Dame graduates on there, both out of the chemical engineering school.
Wow. And the Alumni Association actually has a map online, the Notre Dame Wine Tour. If you Google Notre Dame Wine Tour, you can go there and you can see all the vineyards in Napa and other places in the country owned by Notre Dame grads.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them.
Yeah. So
let me just add
sure.
to that. So if you do go to ours, it says we don't have public tastings, but we we do have private tastings. So if you give us a call and say, hey, we're a domer, we want to come by and taste your wine, just do it, and we're happy to accommodate you.
All right. You don't just do wine, though. You've also, become involved in the movie business here. You said earlier you were interested in cinematography, but we didn't have a major. How did you, first get involved in producing movies?
And well, after I retired, it was like I can pretty much do anything I want. So I'm going to go back and do some of the things I didn't do in my life, and this was one of them. Or it's kind of a little bit like take the path you didn't follow. And of course, I was in Los Angeles at the time, which is kind of the headquarters for the entertainment business, and there's always people around, looking for money to make a movie.
Right.
So I did that. The first one was, I have to tell you, was a complete disaster. It was actually a football movie about a kid's football team, and just ran into some problems, and we kind of killed the whole thing. The second one, we got off the ground pretty well from a production side. It was called Rock Slide. It was a film noir detective story, kind of like the old 40s B movies, and it starred Patrick Warburton. And if you don't know who he is, he played on Rules of Engagement on CBS for a number of years, and he was
David Puddy on Seinfeld.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think. And we had Andy Dick. And then we had a bunch of cameos, which were fun. We had Jason Alexander. We had Eric Roberts. There were a few others in there. Leah Thompson from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
And, so that one, was a nice movie. Didn't make any money. And it wasn't until the third movie that we kind of hit gold, if you will. And it was a documentary. Some of you may have seen. It's called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. And it's about this 85-year-old, at the time, sushi chef, who has this little 10-seat restaurant in the subway of Tokyo. And it is the only 3-star Michelin sushi restaurant in the world. And this is about his search for perfection in making sushi. And he's been doing this since he was like 20 years old. And it's just every day just seeking that perfection. It's also a story about family businesses, because he's got 2 sons. So I think there's a lot of lessons in there about his relationships, with his kids, in the business. So it was really surprised us. And the way I got into this, after 2 movies without much success, I'm going like, maybe you shouldn't do too much of this anymore. So a friend of mine who I'd gotten to know, he was an ex-creative artist agent and really understands what can be sold and what can't be sold, came to me and said, look, I have this movie, I've got the international rights sold for it. I think it's going to be, a big success. Worst case, you'll just get your money back. And I said, what's it about? And he said, well, it's about this chef and sushi. And I said, but Kevin, I don't even like sushi. But I had enough faith in him that if he said he thought it was going to be a winner, that I went ahead. And there were actually 3 of us who provided the major financing for it. So it turned out for a documentary to be a huge success, had a great theatrical run. And the director and producer of the film was a young kid by the name of David Gelb. And he went on, he's made a feature film now for Lionsgate, which I think it was called something like The Zazarus Effect. Ford Motors asked him to do the documentary for the 50th anniversary of the Mustang. And he's just completed a series for Netflix, and I'm not 100% sure of the name, but it's about great chefs of the world. So this was a real launching pad for him for his career, and so we were really proud of him and all he's accomplished.
So I know you said you weren't a huge fan of sushi originally. Have you traveled to Japan to go down to the subway station and sample Jiro's sushi?
Yeah, well, I wish that I could. I haven't been back to Japan for quite a while.
Yeah.
But because of that movie, it became so popular. And even though we made it popular, at one point they said, please don't call and ask for reservations for any more of your friends. So, but you may have seen in the news when, I think this was about a year ago, when President Obama went to meet with Prime Minister or Premier Abe in Japan. Within 45 minutes of landing, they were at the restaurant having sushi.
There you go.
So we thought that was a pretty nice compliment.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I saw it a couple years ago on Netflix. Is it still available streaming on
Yes,
Netflix?
it is. Yeah.
All right, so I really have to check it out. You had such a diverse career and worked on so many different projects, now with wine and movies. What's next? Do you have another upcoming project you're excited about?
Well, I've got a number of things I'm involved in. Basically, I invest in about 4 areas. So one of them is financial services, because my background is the credit bureaus and that. The other is e-commerce, because what we were doing with freecreditreport.com required a lot of e-commerce in terms of advertising, conversion, and so forth. The entertainment industry, and then wine. And that. So I've got some interesting things on the entertainment side. I'm a partner in I would call it a marketing distribution company for independent films. But we are out to change the way that films, particularly independent films, reach their audiences. And it is, and I learned this, kind of the hard way from the first 2 films I was involved with. You have very passionate filmmakers out there who believe in their script. They work very hard. They want to make their movie. They think they're going to get into Sundance, and the movie's going to get bought, and that'll be the start of their career. Well, I started doing the math, and there's something like 70,000 films produced globally in the world, and that's documentaries and short films and feature films and so forth. And then in the U.S., if you look at it, for example, Sundance gets 10,000 entries a year, and they take 200 films. If you look at how many get released in a theater, it's about 600, I believe it is. And then there's some that go direct to VOD or DVD, and maybe that's another 2,000. So I just said, there's a lot of content out there that is not finding its way to the audiences. So without going into any details, we just closed on acquiring a company, I think it was Thursday, that's going to help us reach out to all those filmmakers and provide them a channel to reach the iTunes and the Hulus and in those areas.
Wow, that's exciting.
So I'm excited about
breaking news here on Catching Up With. Yeah.
So, in the financial services area, that is one that is being just disrupted every day, and things are changing. Millennials do not want to bank the way that we, their parents or grandparents have done in the past, and so we're seeing a lot of innovation there. I'm a chairman of a company called Revolution Credit, talking about a new way to evaluate people's credit, not based on historical data like the credit bureaus have, but based on their behavior and their intent. And the results so far have been really outstanding. We've signed up major banks like Capital One, BBVA, I think it is, a Spanish bank, and a number of others. So that's pretty exciting. And then just general in the e-commerce area, there's a lot of stuff going on with social media and how to use social media to market your products. And I've seen some pretty innovative stuff there that I've invested in and that. So, I guess I get so excited about this stuff. Yeah. And in some ways I think, wow, what are things going to be like 50 years from now? Yeah. And it would be great if we could have, a 100-year reunion, which is probably not in the making. But I'd love to see where all this technology ends up, because it really is an exciting time that we're living in.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left, close to out of time here. But do we have any questions from the audience? Anyone interested in asking a question here for Ed? Don't be shy. Got a gentleman right there.
What advice What advice would you give to a budding venture capitalist as far as what to look for in a startup company?
That's a good question, Pete. So I'll tell you what I look for. I mean, you can go through the typical list. You got to have a growing market, etc. But the two things I really look for is, are we going to disrupt the way things are getting done today? And the second thing is the management team, but not in that order. I would say the management team comes first. And the way I would, and I, in addition to starting this company, I've acquired a lot of companies over the years. And the way I always evaluated the management team was, if things went sideways with this acquisition, do these guys know what levers to pull to get things back on track? Can I trust them to do that, and that they're that knowledgeable? So you want to make sure that whoever this guy is that you're putting your trust in has kind of that knowledge or feeling about how to drive the top line and the bottom line by these different levels. Or he's smart enough to realize that whatever that business model was or technology isn't working, and you need to pivot the company in some other way to get it successful. And then in terms of his team, what I've seen too often is, guy wants to start a company, he needs somebody to run technology. Well, guy he hangs out with, drinking buddy, or they were roommates in school. Why don't you come be my technology guy? And so it's they pull this hodgepodge of people together, and normally you end up having to turn over most of those people because they weren't suited for the position or what they needed to do in the first place. So I look very carefully at that team and their experience and what confidence. And then again, as I said, I'm interested in things that are going to disrupt how we're doing things today, in the financial services area, in the film area. Can I say that about the wine? No, I'm kind of just doing what wine has always done, trying to make good wine and tell people about it.
Any other questions for Ed?
Come on, Jeff. I know you had a question.
This is kind of an unfair question because I told him ahead of time I was going to ask this. But as a class of 65 guy who has failed retirement twice, what would you recommend that we do to increase our own financial stability in the coming years?
Buy low and sell high. Buy low and sell high.
All right.
That's been my general recommendation.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for being here. You've had an incredible career since leaving Notre Dame. It's been a great 50 years. Businessman, winemaker, filmmaker, and we really appreciated hearing your story and you sharing your time with us today. So thanks so much. Give it up for Ed Oana.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been really delightful to
thanks. I enjoyed it.
participate.